This is the radio report for the economics final project, and we are the modern day pulpit. This is Porter and Hunter, and we're going to be talking about the COVID-19 era stimulus and fiscal policy. So as I said in the beginning, our current event is the COVID era stimulus and fiscal policy and all the things that it did to our economy. COVID-19 lasted a long time and changed many of the things that we do now, like working at home more and using things like WebEx. It has also given a rise in the stock market and made everything shoot up in value, like homes and cars, which are a big necessity for families and made it hard for a lot of people to financially live normal. It has wrecked our economic stance, which was decently stable before, but caused a lack in supply and demand, which caused many things to rise in value.
COVID-19 is a current pandemic throughout the world. COVID-19 has caused many countries to go into recessions due to the lockdowns. Countries are starting to come out of it due to vaccines and greater immunity. Countries have used government spending to keep their economies afloat through one of the worst modern economic downturns.
COVID was causing things like shortages on goods and people getting laid off because the business is not making enough money that they are working for. As the virus started to spread across the United States and people were getting laid off, the stimulus checks were being handed out to people to be able to pay their bills. As these were being given out, the U.S. was gaining a lot more debt because of all the money they were handing out but not getting it all back. It made inflation skyrocket because of the debt they were going in, and everything was costing more to make. As a result, it was causing everything to be super expensive, and people are not wanting to go back to work because they're making more money from the unemployment than working again.
The economic issue that COVID-19 caused was a struggling economy. The economy was struggling due to massive layoffs and shortage of resources. In response, the government provided forms of stimulus. Stimulus checks of $600, $1,200, and $1,800 were distributed in order to alleviate some of the financial burden on families, as well as give businesses some extra revenue to keep people employed. The Fed also reduced interest rates to 0% to 0.25%.
The pandemic played a big role by having a low supply and a high demand with things like toilet paper, face masks, and hand sanitizer. As people started to see that these things were being sold outright when they were put up for sale in stores, everyone scattered to the stores to try to buy as much of them as they could, and as a result, everything was low on supply. With everything being sold, supply and demand played a very important part in what the pandemic did and how much it changed things. It was a struggle for things to be made and sold because of the lack of workers and how much they could make and sell.
Supply and demand were massively shocked by the pandemic. The limited supply of things like toilet paper, face masks, hand sanitizer, and other cleaning supplies caused prices to skyrocket. As places of work were shut down, only workers necessary to keep society functioning were allowed to continue working. This caused things like gas to drop to almost $1 a gallon, as not many people needed gas to travel. The government role throughout the pandemic has been in funding and trying to slow the spread of COVID. The government was able to pass bills that allowed for spending on vaccine research, loans for businesses, and direct stimulus to citizens. The government also has been passing laws that determine when and where to wear masks. The government also helped people stay off the street and by passing the eviction moratorium, making it illegal to evict those who do not pay rent or their mortgage. The international community's role throughout the pandemic has been providing statistics and other data relevant to stopping this pandemic.
The government's role during the pandemic was to slow down COVID-19 and get it under control as fast as they can, and also fund the things going on like producing vaccines. The government was passing the bills for researchers to be able to research and produce the vaccines for the virus so that they get it under control. They also are the ones that pass the bills that allow the loans for businesses that are trying to stay up and running during the pandemic, and the money to give out the stimulus checks and unemployment checks to the citizens.
The actions taken by the government were too severe. The government should have never shut down the economy, putting people out of work. This could have softened the major crash that happened and would not have caused the widespread panic over things like masks, gloves, and cleaning products. Due to the economy shutting down, rates had to be lowered to extremely low levels to encourage people to borrow and spend again. This has led to the astronomical inflation we have now.
So, as I've been through this whole pandemic, I think that it was controlled as much as the government could control it without taking the people's rights away. And I think that there were some situations where they did take rights, but it was mostly handled the best they could handle it. I think that there were situations where it sometimes got out of control on what the government was mandating of the citizens, like wearing double masks. But in the perspective of getting rid of the virus, I think they did a good job with telling people to stay home most of the time and go out only when the citizens needed things like food.
A short-term solution for the current issue of inflation is to raise interest rates. Raising interest rates will discourage borrowing and limit growth, helping inflation to stop rising as fast. A long-term solution for this issue is to correct as best as possible to get back to 2% inflation rate. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Modern Day Pulpit Podcast. Today we discussed the COVID-era stimulus and fiscal policy. Bye, Mr. Dijkhuis.
Bye.